Good morning, all. Delighted to be here today with special guest Ruth Busby OBE. Ruth's had a career throughout all parts of HR and also coming into learning and development. And also, Ruth represents a charity that we both sit on the board for called Youth Futures Foundation. So I'm delighted to get into today's conversation and really welcome you to today, Ruth. Is there anything you'd like to add to your introduction?
No, that was very kind, thank you.
Brilliant. So the first part where I've been starting the conversations, Ruth, is to really understand sort of the early life of Ruth and what that looked like in the sense of education. So
Yeah.
we've gone back to primary school, but also that particularly the transition from secondary school, whether it was into employment and college, and then also sort of family and sort of how that was for you, particularly in your earlier life. So yeah, it'd be great to hear more around that from yourself, Ruth.
Yeah, so I grew up in Peterborough, which I've just said with the T's included, and as I've said to George, I'm really sorry if I start dropping my T's and H's because you're I grew up in Peterborough, which is in Cambridgeshire, although I would never say I'm from Cambridgeshire. I grew up in Peterborough in a bit called Bretton, and lived with my mum, my two brothers and my younger sister. My dad left when I was 7, so and I'm the eldest of the 4 of us. So grew up there, end terrace house, neighbours lived there the whole time. My brother still lives in the house actually, and owns that house, and the neighbours still live there.
Wow.
So the Mandy, Stephanie and Andrew, or Lefty as we call him, were sort of there. Went to the local primary school, and my brothers both went to the same school as me as well, so it was just like a short walk down the road. It's now got fencing around it to keep it safe, and I don't really remember much particularly. I guess the things that stand out for me from primary school was that my mum always remembered I got mumps when I was 5 or something like that, and I'm an August birthday, so I'm little and I was young in the year, and I got mumps quite early on, so missed a little bit. And then when I think it must have been middle infants, we called it then, or year 1, the teacher was really tall. Like in my head, she's like a giant, but I don't know whether she actually is. And Mum said I was so tiny, I used to be scared. Like I didn't like of the teacher, because she was so big, and I didn't like going into the cloakrooms because there's so many people there, and I was so little. So I remember like that bit. And then the other thing about my primary school that was pretty cool actually is it had a deaf unit. So I can only really do the alphabet and sign language and red and green and bits like that. But that was really interesting and good exposure as a young person actually, to understand disability and to almost normalise being around people that are different, and how do you embrace people. So we do sign language in assembly sometimes. I think we all learned the alphabet. I don't really remember much of it. So that was quite interesting at primary school. And then we had a choice of where we went for secondary school. So there was Bretton Woods, which is now closed, which was probably it was a comprehensive school that was kind of equidistant from our house to the one I went to. And some of my friends from primary school went to Bretton Woods. It closed in the end. It didn't have a great reputation. Then there was Jack Hunt, which was also a comprehensive school that was in a different direction, that had a bit of a better reputation. And then my mum really wanted me to go to the King's School, which was the church school in the centre of town. But I said that was too posh for me and I didn't want to go there. So I didn't go to the King's School, which is a really good school actually. So they're all state schools.
And just on that point, Ruth, I find that really interesting. So was that more because of the type of individuals that you knew was going to be going there, or was it the sort of environment, physical environment?
Oh, I think I wouldn't even go and look at it. I think it was the fear of I wouldn't fit in, and that wouldn't be the place for me. Because the bit I grew up in, we owned. I say we, I didn't. My mum owns the house. Yeah. But it was a mix of council housing and former council housing that people had bought. So it wasn't like a really run down area, but it wasn't like it was a working class area. Yeah. My mum was a teacher and she had to go back to work when Dad left because she had the 4 of us. So it was probably one of those places where we wouldn't have been there if Mum and Dad had stayed together, but we were there. and that was where I was comfortable. That was where my friends were, all of those sorts of things. And I just felt that I wasn't posh enough to go to the King's School. So it was one of those like weird dynamic. I don't know why. I don't know what got into my head, but that kind of carried through a little bit. Where it's like, well, I shouldn't be in here because they're
really. Would you class
posh.
it as a bit of like an early imposter syndrome?
Yeah. I think it was. And Mum wanted me to go to King's, I think, because I was clever.
Yeah.
So she was like, well, that's a good school, and you do really well there.
Continue the momentum of what you've done at primary.
Yeah. So, but I was just like, nah, I don't want to go there. And it was hard. Like one of my best friends went to Bretton Woods, the school that I didn't go to.
Yeah.
Which was like I was quite sad. I missed the fact, but then we lived around the corner, so I still kind of saw her and stuff like that. And then so I went to check out. So secondary school was okay. It was there was always a tension for me where I was sporty, so I always did sport. So when I danced from, I think I was about 2 when Mum put me into dancing. So I did loads of dancing. I did judo for a little bit until I went to a competition and got put in a chokehold, as you do in judo, because that's how it works. And I couldn't breathe very much, didn't like it. So I stopped judo quite quickly because I'm a bit like, ugh, I don't like it. And I'd had I'd had a few fights when I was younger. No, I didn't. I don't particularly like fighting. Even now, I quite like boxing, as in exercise boxing, so punching the pads. Yeah. But if there's any thought of sparring, I'm like, nope. Punch me in the face and I'll cry. And I got punched in the face when I was about 10 and I did cry. It was a girl called Karen. I was like, no, I don't want to fight Karen. I don't want to do this. It's too much of a wuss. So did judo for a little bit, did gymnastics for a little bit, did ice skating, and actually got quite good at ice skating. And I can't remember what competition it was, but I skated at the opening of the Cardiff ice rink. And I'm really proud of that. I got to meet Fergie. I accidentally walked down the red carpet because I thought it was there for me and I was supposed to skate alongside it. But I was only like 9 or 8 or something like that. But I always thought, it's because I was good, because I could do I think I could do a double axel, which is not like loads, but I could, I could just about walk on it. So I could still skate backwards and do little jumps. Spins make me sick now. But my dad says to me, it's not that you were really good, it's that you were really little for your age. So you looked younger than you were, so you looked like you were amazing. I was like, thanks for that. I think I was reasonably confident. But I had my coach, she was called Pat, she left and went to Stevenage. So she was like, you can kind of carry on with me, but there was no way Mum with 4 kids in Peterborough working full time could then drive me to Stevenage all the time. So I stopped skating. And then at secondary school, we had one of our first PE lessons was netball, and the PE teacher told me that I was too short for netball, which is not true actually, because I could have done centre, wing attack, or wing defence. I didn't need to be. There isn't a height rule. But around about the same time, a guy called Mike came and was putting together a girls' football team. And so I tried out for that, and I started off being a goalie, which doesn't make sense. I'm 5'1" for context. And I wasn't 5'1" when I was 11. I was littler than that. I don't think someone said, "Did you ever have growing pains?" I was like, I never really noticed growing so slow. I don't know, not from memory. But I was a goalie, but because we initially played 5-a-side and then 7-a-side. And because I'd done like the ice skating and the gymnastics and stuff, I was quite happy diving. I played in goal initially, and then I do remember a really wet match in Norfolk somewhere, 11-a-side, playing in goal, and it'd be the realisation of like, no, this is not going to work. 11-a-side, bigger goals. You could barely see me. But I went on a camp with Freddie, I can't remember his name. He was a Peterborough United player, Freddie the Kruger, something or other. So there was a photo of me on the back of the Evening Telegraph after this like training camp and everything. But yeah, goalie was not quite for me. So always really, really sporty and quite clever. But because of that, people don't always like that when girls are sporty and clever. So there was a little bit of like, now if it happens to my daughter, I'd say, well, that's jealousy. That's people being jealous. So I would try and dampen things down. So I'd either try and pretend not to be so clever, or to make sure I was going out when everyone else was going out, and like
not committing to your sports.
Yeah. But because I'm quite like, if I'm committed to it, I want to do it. I kind of do it almost secretly.
Yeah, without
because it's a bit like, I don't want them to know. And I remember Mum saying to me, well, not saying to me, she tells my daughter this all the time. The day before I got my GCSE results, I was crying, and it was my 16th birthday. I got my GCSE results on as well. And she said, "Oh, why are you crying?" I said, "I don't want to get straight A's." And she said, "Why don't you want to get straight A's?" I was like, "I'll just be teased. Like, they'll pick on me if I get straight A's because like I can't do that." And then she was like, "So why are you crying?" And I said, "Because I want to get straight A's." She's like, "This makes no sense." I'm like, "I'm a teenager." So it was always that tension. So it wasn't I had a bad time, but I kind of floated between friendship groups.
Yeah.
Never had like, I know some people go through school, don't they, and have like a really tight group of friends
the whole way through.
I have friends from school. I'm friends with them on Facebook. I don't really see them that often because I don't live in Peterborough anymore. But I kind of bounced around. I didn't really feel like I ever found my place, and didn't really feel like I felt settled, if that makes sense.
Throughout the whole period of secondary school.
Yeah, I think so.
And just on that point, because I think that's a really key point, how I picked up, I think, particularly when you look at the career you've gone into, is actually working in teams, people. There, it seems like lots of different people, whether it's external clubs to the school and stuff. And did you sort of see yourself as like a people person from a very young age? Was you more sociable and etc.? I assume from the amount of sports and those type of externals activities, you have to have that sort of confidence in a way. Especially with the variety of sports you've done.
Yeah, so I'm definitely an extrovert. So I like being around other people, proper chatterbox, all of that sort of stuff, as you're all discovering. It's not hard to get me to talk. So I do, so I've always been comfortable being around other people. And I guess confident in that way. Like I remember Mum said to me, we went on holiday, I think Dad had taken two of us and Mum took two of us, and we were, I think we were in Mallorca, and we went to these caves, and Mum is a bit, I don't think she is now, she was a bit claustrophobic. And so she'll say to me, she remembers going into the cave and going, I can't do this, and me taking her hand and saying, I've got you, Mummy, don't worry, I'll look after you. It makes me a little bit teary. But and part of that is because at a young age it was like, well, you've got to be responsible. There's like, Mum, bless her, on her own with 4 kids. I'm the eldest, right? We'll get this group sorted. It's all right. Everything's going to be all right. It's all going to be organised.
And just on that bit, because that's what I pulled out. You shared with us around sort of Mum and Dad splitting, and it seems like, particularly like as you say, like yourself and your other siblings, and to provide and give what sounds like a very like good life. Mum, did you look at Mum as a role model? Are those early? Well, now you look back, do you see like actually some of the traits that you've picked up, particularly like work ethic and etc.?
So she like completely devoted her life to us, like completely sacrificed. So she never remarried or anything like that. Completely devoted her life for us four. And she lives around the corner from us now, so we like moved her closer to her. My brothers are still in Peterborough, but she needs to be with one of her girls. So she lives around the corner from us. She's looked after my kids while I've been working, so I wouldn't be able to do the job I do now without Mum and the support that she's given and stuff. So she absolutely, I don't know how she got through it. I honestly don't know how she got through it, because she didn't have family nearby either. So she did go to church, so she had friends at church and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't know how she did it. So she is incredible, and definitely wouldn't be where I was without her. But also, I think, and I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from her dad, who, like her dad had Parkinson's disease. So one of the reasons she was on her own and didn't have more support from her family was because around about the time I was born, my granddad got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and so he wasn't supposed to drive. I think he did when he found out Dad had left. I think he drove down the motorway from Hertfordshire when he probably shouldn't have done. This is my uncle tells me the story. But so he couldn't, although like he had his wife and all that sort of stuff. And Mum had gone through a lot of trauma. She lost her mum when she was 13.
Wow.
And then Granddad remarried, and I've always called her Nanny, is only 7 years older than my mum. So that was quite hard. So you were like
Yeah.
14, and then your stepmum's 21, but your dad's 50 something, and then there's like she's got two brothers that are closer in age to me than to her. So I think mum's not a natural leader.
Yeah.
Whether that be because of the trauma that she went through, whether that just be because not everyone is, whereas I probably was. So I think there's some things that I've taken from her, and there's other things that are different, but because the space was kind of created for me to do that.
And was that sort of that dynamic with your other siblings as well? Was you sort of the leader of the pack in a sense?
Yeah. Like we've just been on holiday with one of my brothers and one of my sisters. Because I do have another sister who's my dad and stepmom. She's a bit younger. She's in her mid-20s. With like Joy and Dave and their families, we've just been on holiday to France together. So although we live in different places, we're still quite close. And then we're quite close in age as well. There's only 6.5 years between me and my sister, who's the youngest of the four. But yeah, they do still. I don't know whether they defer to me or they just know I'm going to do it. There is still a little bit like Ruth will sort it out. Okay, Ruth's going to do this. But it's funny because some of like I think my brother-in-law has described me as fierce before. I'm like, I'm not fierce. I'm really nice. What do you mean fierce? So maybe if you're on the receiving end, maybe it does come across a little bit different. That's I'm like, no, we're going to do this. All right, okay.
Because that's how people can interpret it. Is sort of as you use example fierce there, but actually getting stuff done.
I'm just getting stuff done.
Moving things forward.
Just need to make a decision and get on with it.
No, exactly, and I think particularly the sort of world of work you went into. But before we sort of talk into particularly the sort of work you've done within HR over the years, but is actually pulling it back to your early part of your employment career. Because I'm always interested. I think a lot of people just see sort of the jobs you're in now, or say the last 5 years, and look at that. But actually, I like pulling it back to what actually was those initial touches of employment, because I can assume they're completely different to the world of work you are now. So it'd be interesting to sort of understand, when did work in life start for yourself?
So my first proper job, I joined the civil service on their fast stream once I'd finished at uni. So that was my first proper job, doing policy stuff.
And just on that, Ruth, fast stream, is that
it's like the graduate scheme.
Perfect.
But you have to do. I always call it, because I can't do things in because I still have this reticence of I'm not posh, even though I now live in South Oxfordshire, and I'll say South Oxfordshire rather than the town I live in. I've still got this little bit of reticence. You have to do like a numeracy test and a verbal reasoning test and that sort of stuff. That's like the first stage. So I call that like the brains test. I genuinely didn't think I'd pass the numeracy one. And then once you pass that bit, you then go to group selection, where you do group exercises and interviews and all that sort of stuff before you then get it. But that wasn't my first job. So that was my first proper full-time employment job. I helped one of my friends with a paper round. I worked on a market stall briefly. I did that with my friend Mel, and she got us. It was like cash in hand stuff. Us this. I can't even remember how it happened. I must have been about 14. But the first proper job, as soon as I got my national insurance number, I started working. And
that's at 15, isn't it?
I think it is 15. Like 15 and I don't know, is it 15 and 3/4 or whatever it is. I'm one of the youngest in the year as well, so I had to wait longer than others. But my first job was at Olympus Sport. So you're selling shoes and all that sort of stuff. And that was, I think, about £2.50 an hour or something like that. Then I went and worked in a card shop, which was £2 an hour, but I had more hours a week. And this was because basically I wanted to buy clothes and everything. So I was like, I need money, so I need to work. So worked in the card shop, and then they accused me of theft. I don't know how much had gone missing from the till. I think it was like 20 quid or something like that. Accused me of theft. Took me into the back room, and they were like, right, you need to leave, all this sort of stuff. Give us the money back. I was like, I hadn't taken the money. I haven't taken the money. And they were like, well, we'll have to call the police. And I'm like, well, you can call the police. And I remember phoning my dad going, oh my God, they're saying all of this sort of stuff. And they didn't call the police. I would have been happy for them to have called the police.
Yeah,
I didn't take anything. Left that job, but then I think the next job after that, I'm pretty sure I then went to work at McDonald's, which actually paid quite well. And it was a walk from home as well, so I didn't have to get the bus into town. But I only ever got 3 stars because I wasn't very good in the kitchen because I always burnt my knuckles. So I think I'm trying to work out what my 3 were. I think I definitely got the one for the till. I definitely got the one for the drive-through. I think I might have got the one for the chips. I'm not sure. It might have been the chips one, but definitely the grill. No, so they always just put me on the till or whatever. And I think from there I went and worked. I'm trying to remember if it was that way around at Pilot, which is a clothes store.
Yeah.
And I worked with my best mate actually, I don't know what I call her, Amanda, Mandy. From next door, so we worked there together for a bit, and then because I did A levels and everything, and then in the so that was all through like from basically year 10 probably
Up until year 18, 19.
Yeah, until it would have been 18 because my birthday being just before.
Yeah.
Like going to uni. And then the summer between A levels and going to uni, I worked at Coca-Cola Schweppes doing telesales. And that same summer, my dad said to me that he would pay, or he didn't just say it to me, I think he said it to the boys as well, if we learned to touch type at 20 words a minute or something like that, he would pay us 50 quid. And if we could get it to 30 words a minute, he would give us an extra 20. So I learned in the space of 2 weeks. I was like, just went home after work every day. I was like, right, I'm going to, so I can touch type now because I essentially got bribed to learn to touch type. Which is quite handy from a work context.
Yeah.
It makes me much quicker.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how fast I am now, but yeah. So I always had those jobs at uni. So I went to Keele University. I think my mum would have loved it.
Sorry, Ruth, my geography is absolutely awful. Where's Keele?
Stoke-on-Trent. So between like Birmingham and Manchester.
Ah, right. Wow. So you moved away.
It was cold, yeah. So I like when I was looking, Mum would have loved me to have gone to like Cambridge or something like that. I didn't have the grades. I did well, but I didn't have the grades for that. But again, I did the no, I don't want to go there because I'm not posh enough. But that's not.
So you disqualified
so
that.
So just put that on mind. Went to look at Sheffield, but on the day I went to look at Sheffield, it was raining and it was hilly, and Peterborough's flat. It's in the fens.
Yeah.
So I'm not used to hills, and rain coming down hills did not look like an attractive prospect.
Yeah, it weren't the professors or the lecturers. It was
raining
flat ground.
and there were hills. So I went to Keele. The day I went to Keele, it was sunny. Keele is also rainy and wet and on the top of a hill. But on the day I visited, didn't seem like it, so it was fine. So Keele was nice because it was campus based.
Right.
So it was much like more like community and all of that.
So accommodation was on there. Yeah. It's your first experience, I assume, of independent living.
Yeah, exactly that. And so I was like 18 in a month or something like that. And I'm still good friends with the girls that I was in E-Block Barnes with. We're catching up next month.
Brilliant.
I don't know, is it next month, November? There's 5 of us that still get together like every year, catch up, and that's where I met my husband as well. I met him in my first year at Keele.
Out university?
At uni, yeah. But I worked on the bars to start off with because I needed money to spend on drink, clothes. I did think that the student loan was kind of free money, so I didn't have the monetary awareness that
it's really interesting on the student loan, because I hear that particularly from sort of young people going through that at the moment, where they have a similar mindset, but you have to pay that back.
I didn't have the financial education that was useful, that I needed. Like that was definitely something missing. Yeah. So I was like, overdrafts are fine. That's just the bank. Like that's just free money. Yeah. Like why do
you
I
learn
need to pay
from
that
it in
back?
a way, sort of. I look at that sort of stuff in sort of sense of how my mum was, and it was like an overdraft was fine, a credit card was fine,
mum would use credit all the time,
or actually paying things on fire. Actually, that was just what you do in life, and that it's interesting you say that financial education, because in a way you've sort of I've particularly had to self-teach myself. I still don't think I'm there. But that's interesting. You had that similar. You had to sort of learn that on your way.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a driver for working. I needed the money because I wanted to buy stuff. Yeah. And I wanted to go out drinking with my friends and all of that sort of stuff. So I worked in the bar. I wasn't very good in the bar.
I much prefer being on the other side.
I'm just not very good at anything that relies on common sense or physical tasks. Yeah. So, and then I worked in the Students' Union in the marketing department, helping to write the Fuzzy Duck, which was the newspaper
for the university.
For the union, for the Students' Union. So I did that, and then I stayed on at uni and did a master's, and I worked in the shop during that period and helped them with like their accounts and that sort of stuff. sitting
You
out
worked
having to do bits.
literally the whole way through
Yeah,
through
but
university.
my husband, who was then obviously my boyfriend, we
Yeah.
started living together from my second year at uni. He lived in the house with 6 of us girls. We had the attic roof, and then the girls were all in the other bits. And I think it was either in my final year,
Yeah.
or when I was doing my masters, that he started subsidising. Like, he basically started funding my spending, so I didn't have to work as much, so I could focus on
Doing your masters.
getting my masters done and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't work very much when I was in the shop and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was in the shop that one of the ladies who was a year older than me had told me about the civil service fast stream. She was like, "Oh, this is a really good graduate programme, you should apply for it." I didn't even know what the civil service was, but she was like, "It's a good graduate scheme."
And I think this takes us back to, as you say, coming from particularly a working class background, and actually, I particularly before I started my career, I just see government as them sort of very high privileged people in the Houses of Parliament, and that was the image in my head. Actually, like the government departments such as DWP, HM, Treasury, it was all just that big building up in Westminster. So I find it fascinating how that's the way that actually it wasn't a newsletter or in the paper or anything like that. It was actually just someone sharing that knowledge, and I think that is what I'm a big believer in, like just knowledge sharing.
Exactly.
It's not labelling it mentoring or something like that, but people just sharing actually stuff that they've either experienced or aware of. But just before we go into sort of the civil service fast track scheme and sort of post then, what I've picked out from a lot of your roles, there a lot of people necessarily engaging, whether it's sort of, as you mentioned, McDonald's, the telesales and etc. Is there one of them that you really enjoyed doing that you could pick out? As well as the financial piece.
As well as getting paid.
Because to be honest, my head, particularly at the young, I would always look at what was the pound, and actually that do my motivation in the sense. But was there ones where you thought bits of the role, actually I enjoyed that?
So McDonald's and Pilot were quite fun because I liked the team I was with.
Right.
So it wasn't really the work. I liked the Pilot. I liked being with Mandy, and we'd get the bus in together or whatever. And actually, the team at McDonald's was quite nice. Like, it was quite a fun team. So although it was a bit like you'd go home smelling the grease and everything, it was like they paid well and the team was quite nice.
Get a free meal as well.
I did get, I know. I was super skinny when I was that age. I needed feeding up. So I liked the one in the union where I was doing the like newsletter, because that felt like I was being creative. Yeah. So I liked that from that perspective. The Coca-Cola trucks one I quite liked because it wasn't it wasn't proactive sales. I did work at, I can't remember what it was like. I have a phrase for you. It was at a call centre. This was at uni. Yeah. Where it was customer retention, and you had to phone people to say, "I know you're leaving, but I can offer you this deal. Would you like to stay?" But they kept giving us the same lists, and I hated that because I'm a bit of a people pleaser and I don't like being pushy. Yeah. So I did not like it. So I would do things like, because they would know how many calls you'd make, I'd phone them and hang up after 4 rings. So it looked like, they didn't answer. So I was like, I feel like I'm harassing people. Whereas the Coca-Cola shirt's really bad, isn't it? I left that after a week. I wasn't there very long. The Coca-Cola Schweppes one, you were phoning like news agents and stuff and saying, "Hi, just phoning for your order this week. What would you like? 4 pallets of this." That was quite nice because you started to get to know people, and you had some little sales targets. Yeah. So it was a bit like, "I'll see if you can upsell this." But it felt a bit more natural in the conversation. It's like, "Oh, we've got a bit of an offer on Lilt. What do you like?" More relationship building, and as you say, not the hard sell and trying to push something down to someone. Because now if we sort of go on to your career and actually starting within the civil service, what was the sort of the area that you started initially in? So I mentioned I did a master's. So I did a master in philosophy, which is basically it's not self-taught, but you don't have lectures. So it's kind of like the first year of a PhD. So I did an MPhil in post-Soviet organised crime. So it was in the history department, but I was writing about basically the rise of the Russian hacker. So how, this was back in 2001. So I am published in Jane's Intelligence Review under my maiden name. I can't remember any of it. Please don't ask me anything great. But that was under the tutelage of a chap called Dr. Mark Galliotti, who writes quite a lot. about Russian history and Russian organised crime and all of that sort of stuff. And I wasn't ready to leave uni because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he said, "Oh, I've got this MPhil that might work really well for you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, fine. That sounds interesting. I'll do it because it's
and that's how it came around. Wow.
Yeah, and then I was able to get a loan to cover the cost of the MPhil and stuff. So I'd done this masters in post-Soviet organised crime. When you go through the civil service fast stream, you get to choose like what departments would you like to go in. So I picked Ministry of Defence and Home Office because all the stuff I'd enjoyed doing at uni and all that sort of stuff was kind of like political history, war history, all of that sort of stuff. So I was like, right, okay, MOD or Home Office would work for me. And they put me in the Home Office. So I was like, oh, good, okay, that's good. So they've got a cybercrime unit in there. They've got all the organised crime stuff and the terrorism bits in the Home Office. And they put me in the family policy unit. So I've never ever done anything since with the research I did. So I worked in family policy randomly, then moved into the juvenile offenders unit and did policy around early risk, early identifiers of risk for young people. So what are the things that might make someone more likely to go on to commit criminal activity, and what preventative measures can you put in place and stuff, which is really interesting, especially given the work we do now with Youth Futures Foundation. So I worked on parenting orders. So the parenting orders existed at that point in time, but we were looking to add parenting orders in when someone had got an antisocial behaviour order. And then there was a challenge against parenting orders in the High Court, so did some stuff on that. And then worked in the National Offender Management Service, which doesn't exist anymore now.
Is that like probation?
Yeah, so it was, at the point at which I joined, so I worked with Martin Leary, who was the chief exec of the National Offender Management Service. He went on from there to become the chief exec of Bernardo's, the children's charity.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy. Like huge impact in terms of seeing someone so kind and gracious, but firm, doing a leadership role and he'd gone to a polytechnic and all that sort of stuff. So he was one of the few people at the top ranks of the civil service who hadn't gone to Oxford or Cambridge. He was a really genuinely brilliant guy, or is a brilliant guy, but was in the context of the civil service. So it was when they were bringing prisons and probation together, because they said, well, look, we need to look at it as one whole system and how things work through.
Well, so it used to be separate?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so this would have been like 2003. It was brought together. So I ran his private office. I was his private secretary. So it was with him in all the meetings. So
exposure, I can imagine.
Yeah. And I was there when Harold Shipman, who you might not remember because it's such a long time ago, but he was a doctor who murdered a lot of his patients, and he died by suicide. So I was there when that happened, when Maxine Carr, who was the girlfriend of the guy who killed two young girls and went to prison for sort of aiding and abetting a criminal, when there was lots of debate about whether she should be released, whether to release the identity of the Bulger killers and that sort of stuff. So really fascinating time to be there, working with someone brilliant. So that was brilliant doing that, and then went to do a little bit with the Department of Health, this was quite briefly, around the link between health and offending, and then worked on some legislation around incitement to religious hatred. So one of my funniest moments was an MP called Fiona McTaggart, who was a Home Office minister. I think she was the MP for Slough. And this bit on incitement to religious hatred was quite important because 9/11 had happened. There'd been a bit of a backlash against people from the Muslim communities. So this bit about incitement to religious hatred was important because people were trying to drive up hate, because they would talk about Muslims when they meant people of Pakistani heritage or Bangladeshi heritage, but the BNP and all that sort of stuff knew that if they said Muslim, it was fine. They couldn't be prosecuted under the incitement to racial hatred legislation because being a Muslim is not a race, it's a religion. So this was sort of tightening up the law to say, no, we know what you're doing, we're not going to let you do that kind of thing. But it wasn't going brilliantly well as part of a wider piece of legislation. And Fiona was sat in a meeting and she had my head of, who was called Godfrey, which is very typical civil service. And then sat in the room, and she said, apologies for my language. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes,
She said, well, we're fucked, aren't we? And Godfrey, bless her, went, well, Minister, we can come back to you with some advice. She kind of looked at me with a little bit of like, oh, and I went, we're pretty fucked, but let's see what we can do about it. And so we brought in Rowan Atkinson and Salman Rushdie to come into the same meeting room so that we could tell them why they weren't going to be able to stop telling jokes or writing things that they wanted to write because of this piece of legislation, literally in the same room. It was the most bizarre thing, but like fantastic experience. And like, I mean, how old was I? Like 25 or something like that. And I was just like, well, why don't we get people together and have a chat? Let's see if that works.
It's the best way to solve things.
And it did go through. The legislation did go through in the end, as its own piece of legislation. It didn't necessarily stop things, but it gave that sense of feeling a bit more in control. So I had quite a lot of fun doing like the policy stuff in the civil service before I moved into HR.
I think that is the wealth of experience, particularly exposure, because I think a lot of people that I've necessarily spoke to in the civil service, it's probably taken several years to get that type of exposure. So it's interesting how you went from sort of the graduate program and then into sort of the secretary role and then into sort of the policy roles. But also I'm picking out actually your passion of supporting the marginalised people as well. And I'm starting to see how that thing's now obviously come up much more in your career with the stuff that you do around sort of well-being over and above your day-to-day role. But I'd be really keen to hear how sort of the journey started within sort of HR and then actually sort of particularly the rail sector and how you've come into that sector and any challenges that you're faced as well on your journey through it.
So I only really did HR as a short-term thing because at the time, so I was only on the grad scheme, so it was the fast stream for 2 years, and then I got promoted off it. So while I was private secretary, I got promoted to grade 7, which was the first proper management. There's management grades below that, but that's kind of like
straight from the graduate scheme.
So that happened a bit quicker than I expected because I just thought, well, I might as well apply for it, and if I don't get it, I probably won't get it this time, but I'll learn what I need to learn to pass it the next time. And then passed it. And at that point in time, there was something called professional skills for government, which said if you're going to be a permanent secretary, so lead one of the government departments, you can't just be good at policy, you need to know how to run a business. So you need to either do operations or corporate services. And I really thought seriously about going to be a prison governor because I had quite a lot of exposure to the prison system through the work I'd done in Martin and everything. But for 2 reasons I didn't. One, husband's a copper and we were like, he might be nicking them and then I'll be at the prison they're going into, and Busby's not that common a name. So like, is that a bit awkward? But the main reason was I went and visited quite a lot of prisons over the time I worked with Martin, and it was Feltham actually I was in. And I was having a tour around and someone banged on. I mean, this happened in a high security one as well, but slightly different there. They didn't want to take me down a corridor because they were like, oh, we won't take you down there because that might be a bit like unsettling. And then I felt unsettled and I thought, I can't be a governor of somewhere if I'm a little bit nervous. That's not going to work. You need to you need to own the place. Not in a but treat people with dignity. But you need to feel confident. No, I'm in charge here. And Martin was great because he pushed the decency agenda. So he was very much, you don't refer to them by their surname. They're human beings. You treat them kindly. He talked really openly about the outrage of sharing cells and how outrageous that was from human dignity perspective and all of that sort of thing. So there was a bit in my heart that was like, you can go there and make a real difference. But then there's a reality of, I probably just have a little bit too much nerves about it. So I went into HR because I was like, well, if I do corporate services, I can either do like finance, but better with words, or I could do HR.
Wow.
So I went into HR as a business partner initially, which is not the normal way people go into HR. Normally you go in and you start doing casework and all of those sorts of things. Whereas I went in as a business partner to senior leaders to go, right, here's how you need to think about people in your area and all of that sort of stuff. Then did pay and industrial relations for the Home Office. So dealing with the unions and all that sort of stuff. And this is the bit like, well, I said I don't like being punched in the face. There's also a little bit of me that's a bit like, what's the worst that can happen? So there was a strike and they were picketing outside the front of the Home Office. And they phoned up for one of my team and she wasn't there. And she said, oh, you need to come down. There's been an assault on the picket line. So I instantly go, what? What do you mean? I was like, have the police been called? No. I was like, right, I'm coming down. So I went straight down because I'm like, this is outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, so if it offends my sense of justice, I'm like, this is not happening. Chatted with the security guard. There hadn't been an assault. There'd just been a bit of jostling that made someone feel a bit uncomfortable. And I was like, right, okay, who was it? Right, that guy over there. And I was like, right, I'll go and have a word. So I went out and I was like, mate, can you come here a minute, please? In my head, I'm like, oh, I think I zoned my husband.
But you're so
frustrated. He came over and I said, look, I don't have a problem with you being here.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with you picketing. But don't make it uncomfortable. Like, don't intimidate people and make them feel unsettled. That's not okay. And if you keep doing that, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And he was like, and then it was fine after that. I went back upstairs and everyone was like, I can't believe you did that. I was like, why wouldn't I? They said, weren't you scared? I was like, what's he going to do?
Yeah.
I'm a tiny little woman. That would look outrageous. Like, why would he do anything? Think it through. So yeah, I did that. Worked in the cabinet office for a little bit, doing like senior civil service pay stuff. And then I left the civil service because during my maternity leave with my daughter, the coalition government came in, and it wasn't I didn't leave for political reasons, but they were shrinking the size of civil service HR. Right. So the opportunities for promotion weren't there in quite the same way. So I went and joined the University of Reading as deputy HR director, because I just thought, well, I'll give it a crack, see if I get the job and try there. And I think for me, that was the realisation, and it led to like a period of about 10 years, a realisation that actually I was at that time still quite a young woman, like 31 I think when I left, working in a very male-dominated environment. Because although universities, you think universities are really diverse because the student body is really diverse, but actually, when you look at like the number of professors, there's a really low number of female professors. There's not the ethnic diversity in the professor cohort or senior management either. And so I think it then, like, I realised how kind of blessed I'd been in the civil service, because when I was there, it was like almost 50-50 for senior civil servants, male, female, and it was quite ethnically diverse. And some of that's because it was London, but like it was a much more diverse place to work. And then that was where I first started experiencing some of the gender discrimination stuff. So comments about what I was wearing. I remember wearing a like, when I say strapless dress, it makes it sound like I was in a I had my
party dress.
Yeah, I wasn't in a party dress. It was like a summer dress, so it had straps. It just didn't have the shoulders on it because it was 30 degrees, and I was told that was inappropriate and all of it. So they were by an older man. So there was all of that sort of stuff going on. I was asking for advice on, the person's not there anymore. Asking for some advice on a presentation, and I was told I was young, attractive and female, so no one had asked me any difficult questions. So just like nothing major, but just enough to start chipping away at your confidence. And it was there that I got told that I needed gravitas, and this was something that I then like tackled for a long time. Like, what is gravitas? What does it mean? And is it something I'm lacking, or is it I'm just not a man? So I did a lot of work on that. I went from there to the Atomic Weapons Establishment, and worked in HR there, again very male.
Weapons Establishment.
Yeah. So they provide the nuclear deterrent for the nation. And I'm currently advertising at petrol stations in Oxfordshire. So if anyone's interested in a career at AWE. I worked there, and that's a real mix of like blue collar workers and also like literal rocket scientists. So a really interesting like mix of people there. Again, very male dominated, particularly in senior leadership, much more diverse now. So it was kind of through those roles that, like, I'd done the theory around equality and diversity in the civil service. It was through those roles that you then really see it and go, this is why it's needed, this is why it's important. So always drove a lot of the activity there, because my belief very firmly is everyone has the right to be in every place. And by doing that, you get much better outcomes. And that includes sort of social mobility, ethnicity, gender diversity, LGBTQ, disability, all of those sorts of things. So loads of hard experiences there, but a real sort of learning ground to find sort of my own resilience, massive issues with imposter syndrome again, massive issues with imposter syndrome. But then I got approached to join the railway in Great Western Railway. So a headhunter approached me. So I went through a competition and everything, but I was sort of tipped off for it, and didn't think I'd get it. But I thought, well, I'll give it a go because I was a commuter for like 9-10 years. So I'd had the customer experience through not a brilliant time in the railway's performance. It's much better now. And thought, I'd give it a crack. And I nearly walked out from the interview because I was so nervous. I was like, no, why would I be here? Why would they listen to me? What have I got to bring? But grounded myself, like literally did some breathing, went in and got it. And I remember a month after I first got there, bearing in mind I'd never been a director before, never worked in the railway. There were 2 women around the exec table. I was the only female director at the time. But 1 month in, I thought, I haven't once thought I shouldn't be here. This is nice. I feel valued and respected for what I bring. And partly that was because they wanted someone from outside. And Mark, who's the MD at Great Western, was very keen to bring in diverse thinking, whether that be, whatever that difference might be. And partly because they respected my professional knowledge, because it was not something that, I mean, they're good people managers and everything, but it wasn't something that they valued and recognised the professionalism of someone from that sort of background. And that's not to say it's easy. It's a male dominated industry, massively male dominated. So we've got it up to 28% female in Great Western now, and it was about 22% female when I joined. So like that's improved. Industry as a whole is about 20% female. So it's quite low numbers. But it's getting there, and change is coming.
And culture, I can imagine, has been a big shift.
Culture's become a big shift, and I think some of the reason for the cultural shift is the recognition that we're here to provide a customer service. And if you provide a customer service, and if you think about it in that way, so even things like changing the names of our apprenticeship programs, so they used to be called operations apprentices, and now they're customer service apprenticeships. So it's the same apprenticeship. We've just labelled it something different, and then that attracts different people to come and do it with slightly different backgrounds. We look at where we look at where do we go out and recruit from and all that sort of stuff, so that we're not just going to the same places all of the time. But and now I work across Great Western and Network Rail. So Network Rail is the infrastructure provider. So the overhead lines, the tracks, the signal boxes, everything that you need to run the trains is provided by Network Rail, and more than that. I'm simplifying it a little bit, looking after the bridges, all of those sorts of things. The train operator literally is the one that you'll see them on the train. So they're the drivers, the train managers, the people at the stations. So now I work across both bits. You start to get to see how the whole system comes together.
Careers in there as well.
Loads.
Because I bet that's the bit as well. Is actually when you look at the stats on diversity across certain roles, I think they must have fluctuated as well. But that's fascinating to understand how you can, as you say, the reason that you got brought in was really much based on sort of your academic to a certain extent, but also the experience that you managed to gain in the civil service and how that's perceived. But then, as you say, going into a highly male-dominated area, and particularly with a role of a director within HR, you'll tend to, majority of the time, working with senior leaders as well. And I know that you've got a real passion around well-being as well. So it'd be great to hear around some of your work around well-being.
And one thing I will say, so one thing I did when I joined the railway is I said to Mark, my boss, because a few people had said, but it's not really diversity when the woman on the board is the HR director, is it? And I'm like, thanks a lot, that's nice. Spent 3 years doing my MSc in HR. Don't worry. No, don't count, do I? If only I did something different. But I genuinely wanted to understand how the railway works, even at weapons establishment, how does this business work? That was important to me. So I did my certificate in railway operations just to get a bit of a base understanding, so that I can engage in conversations and not just be, we'll talk to her when it's the people stuff. Because I really believe that you need to understand the whole business to be able to influence. And I did my certificate with our apprentices. So graduated with a couple of the apprentices when we finished it all, which was a bit delayed because of COVID. But it was quite nice spending time with them when they
I think that's a really good tip in general. I think that a lot of people sometimes can overlook is actually, if you're going particularly into a new sector, just just make sure you learn the steps, because it helps with those sort of, particularly if you're coming in to sort of disrupt certain things as well. You don't want to be pulled down because you've not got the specific knowledge. You know enough to be able to, probably not the best term, but hold your own.
Yeah, exactly that.
So it's
it's listening, and I'll say it in a slightly different way. So you know, if we had there's a type of signalling called ECTS. I can't exactly remember what the acronym is, but it's European trackside signalling. So the signal stuff becomes available in the driver's cab rather than them having to look at it outside. I think that's correct. If anyone from the railway knows that wrong, I'm really sorry. But anyway, it's an enhanced type of digital signalling, and we were putting it into a new stretch of railway between Paddington and a bit further out than Paddington. And when it first went in, it didn't quite work, and that had happened before when they put it in, and I'd remembered this, and I said, isn't it a bit like when you put an iOS update on your phone? You kind of need to just take it off and put it back on again and see if that works. And they were like, no. It was kind of that, but because and there's a bit of it likes being underestimated, and I'm like, I am listening. So like, I am an extrovert. I love talking. But actually, you almost get as much from just being quiet and listening, and sort of almost managing that extroversion to go, it's okay if I don't say anything, I can just sit and listen and learn. And that's been quite a journey for me. But the well-being stuff, I think loads of people are affected by mental health, aren't they? And what's nice is that people talk about it now. What's not nice is that the infrastructure, particularly from a government provided infrastructure, is not there, and it's not there at the point at which people need it, because you can navigate it in crisis if you know what you're looking for, but often if you're someone who's going through a mental health crisis, you're not in a place to be able to navigate it. And thank God for some brilliant charities like Mind and Calm, and there's a Papyrus, I think, which work with young people, and the Samaritans. The railway works a lot with the Samaritans because there are particular challenges on the railway. Yesterday there was a fatality outside Swindon. Tuesday there was a fatality outside Swindon. It is a challenge that people in the railway face, and I guess a couple of things came together. So you know it's difficult from that perspective. You know family members and friends who've experienced things, and they may have articulated it as mental health or may not have done. I think COVID was a massive driver to start talking more openly, and actually was a big platform for me and my team in HR to start talking to the organisation, because we were hosting very, very regular calls. This is what's going on, this is how we're adopting different policies, these are the changes that we're making, but it's really important for you to look after your mental health. This is a very disruptive time, here's things that you can do. I trained as a mental health first aider when we brought in mental health first aiders to Great Western, because I thought if I'm going to advocate it, I need to understand it. I think I'm out of date, so I need to do it again because it only lasts a certain amount of time. But but COVID kind of gave us that opportunity. And I remember on one of the manager calls, because I'd said something again about mental health, and there was a message saying, stop telling us we've all got mental health problems. You're giving us mental health problems by talking about it. And I've always been a bit unapologetic. I'm like, I'm going to talk about things that make you feel uncomfortable, because there's someone that needs to hear it, and you might find it uncomfortable and think, oh, you're just making a big fuss about it. But there might be someone listening who thinks, no, I really need some help, and now I've heard it the fourth time, I'm going to go and do something about it. So I think that kind of opened the door a lot for us. And then I got involved in two things. One, starting to work more with the Samaritans, and Great Western, along with the Department of Transport, commissioned a report into the mental health of railway workers, which we published, I think it was last year, that said people who work on the railway have sort of a unique level of exposure to things that challenge their mental health, partly through incidents on the railway, partly through nasty behaviour from railway users. Most people who travel on the railway are lovely. When things don't go to plan, it's frustrating, and often that frustration is taken out on individuals, particularly post-COVID. I think everyone's tempers got a little bit shorter. It was a bit quicker to be, exactly. And then you had all the conflict around whether people were wearing masks or not, and all of that sort of stuff. So the Samaritans report was really, really interested in that sense, in terms of giving us some really useful insights. And mental health at work worked with them, the Samaritans, to produce the report. So for me, that was someone who's not a medical or wellbeing practitioner. that was really important. And I'm a great believer in we talk about things, we share, like we amplify. Like we said, it's not, you don't need to go and have a mentor all the time, but share things that you know, and that might help someone, kind of thing. And then I got involved in something called Rail Wellbeing Live, which is now in its 5th year.
Wow.
So I was on the steering group for it for its 3rd year, but no, 2nd and 3rd year. And I think it's 17 or 18 companies from across the railway sponsor this online event. So originally it was planned to start in 2020 as an in-person event, and then got switched to online because of COVID. And it's a free event for anyone in the railway. It's all online. Initially 2 days of webinars, all of that sort of stuff that you can go on, watch, engage with, and all of those sorts of things. And so I was originally on the steering group, and then last year took over the reins as the exec sponsor of it. And it's brilliant because you get to see other people's lived experiences, so you get to understand things. Across the country. We get brilliant speakers. So last year I got to interview Davina McCall, which was quite good fun. I was like, I'll do that. I'm in charge. I want to be now. I want to interview her. That will be nice. Thank you, please. The year before I interviewed Professor Green, where he was talking about his struggles with mental health and everything. This year, unfortunately, one of our keynotes is now unable to do it, so I'm just waiting to see. I'm hosting the opening panel, but we've got Katie Piper is one of the keynote speakers, and Dame Kelly Holmes will be sharing her journey, and Stuart Pearce, the former footballer, they're our headline speakers, and then we've got loads of sort of specialists around ultra processed food, all of that sort of stuff. So I've been really privileged to be able to see all of that, but that's all, like, it's 3 days this year. That's free for anyone in the rail industry.
The content again.
The content's amazing.
It's a real mix of practical tools, but the inspirational bit of people that are deemed as sort of celebrities in a way, and actually then talking about their personal. I think that's a lot more people are vulnerable to share their own experiences. Now, and as you say, the insights that you're getting from across the country, at all different levels, whether it's a train driver, someone that's working in services functions, to someone that is on the train, and actually maybe getting that sort of feedback from some of the public at certain points as well. I think that's the bit that sort of I see the dial moving with organisations. Is not just doing it insular in your own company now, industry wide, which sounds like that is.
It is, and I think there's a couple of things. So if you look at our ill health figures, mental health is one of the biggest drivers of long-term sickness. And I think there's research now that shows actually being off work is probably not good in terms of recovery, but that's quite hard because actually traditionally it's a bit like, well, just go away and sort yourself out and come back.
Or a flexi approach, which is probably
I'm all right today, so I'll come in. And there's a brilliant lady called Tilly who we've done some stuff with in Great Western, who's a former police inspector, who talks about menopause, and she talks about menopause in relationship to she'd have good days and bad days. So she developed a traffic light system essentially to say, on a red day, I can't make any decisions because I've just got too much brain fog. I'm in too much of a place where that's not going to work for me. But on a green day, absolutely fine. On an amber day, well, let's just be sensible about it. And she was an operational police inspector. So you get brilliant insights. So you go, how do we, and you could do that with mental health. You know what, today, I'm just not, I'm red. So either let me work quietly by myself or don't expect much interaction. But you can only do that if people feel they're in an environment where they can share that. So you have to create that environment that says it's all right. And that's really hard to do because everyone's in slightly different places around mental health, but the sickness that's there, and then the biggest cause of sickness for under 30s is mental health. So that's different to the slightly older demographic. In the rail industry is a bit of an older demographic because people stay for a long time. So increasingly, it's something that as employers we need to look at and not view it as a problem, but say, how do we create an environment where we help? And you can get into arguments about is it an employer's responsibility to do that? But I'm a bit like, well, you're helping. So why not treat people as humans and see if you can help?
You look after you the other way, but all process. If you look after your people look after you.
Exactly.
So to give them as much as possible, and if it is still seen as though to do that, because actually the long-term benefits, in a not sort of the economic sense, but in the social sense,
exactly.
be honest, is the key one as well. Just two questions I've got to finish up on, Ruth. So, if you could give one bit of advice to some of our listeners that, not necessarily in the equivalent of, because we will have some listeners that are HR professionals and working in sort of talent acquisition, but also we've got listeners that are on their career journeys and their employment journeys. And just like if you could share one piece of advice. I
would say just do things that you enjoy. So I always get asked, like, how did you move from here to here? And it like, sometimes it looks like it was a really logical plan, and there is some thinking behind it. But actually, take the opportunities, but be really clear. What's the stuff that really energizes you and engages you, that you find interested? Yeah, exactly. And although being mindful that you can't, like, not every day is going to be 100% interesting. Like, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. But do things that interest you, that you've got a passion about, rather than doing what you think you have to do. And the other thing I'd say is, like, there's lots of talks about strengths and weaknesses and how to improve your weaknesses. Focus on your strengths. If it's a weakness that is really, really critical to the career that you're doing, because you're going to get sacked if you haven't got it or whatever, then yes, look at it. But actually play to your strengths. And then when you're part of a team, just make sure you're in a team where that rounds it all out, rather than over focusing on, I can't do this, therefore I'm not good enough.
Yeah, no, to be honest, that's a really good point, because actually part of our platform, we do a psychometric. And one of the cautious decisions we made is, naturally human beings always look at their weaknesses. It's like we had a similar psychometric sort of thing. Straight away my eyes was like, oh crap, I need to improve on these areas. Whereas the bit in our platform gives you your 7 strengths and focuses on, use them to sort of sell yourself, and actually you'll get other people, as you've mentioned there, in the team that have the weaknesses that you've got as their strengths, and they complement.
And an example is, I'm not very good at following process. I'm quite people-centric in my decision-making, which leads to unforeseen implications elsewhere. And I've got a really high risk appetite. So it's important for me that the team that look after employee relations actually are good at process, and they can help. And I'll challenge them when they're being a bit too risk-averse, but they can challenge me to say, well, we just need to do these sorts of things. So, like, it's getting that balance and going, right, I know I need this. Otherwise, we'll probably be all right, but we might end up doing some things that get us in trouble. And it's, as you say, having that as that's their strength, but I've got a base knowledge that I need to have. And we know that, and we recognise that, and we respect that about one another.
Definitely. The last question that we finish up on, Ruth, is if you could choose out of your sort of role models, idols, if you could choose someone for one day to be, who would it be and why?
So we were talking about, you gave me the tip. I mean, it would be really easy to say Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris. I've just read her, or listened to her autobiography, and she's incredible. Like, her experience is amazing, and I really, really, really hope she wins the election, but we'll see. But I'm going to go with our friend Shea Barkin, who is chair of Youth Futures Foundation and chief exec of Centrepoint, the charity of homelessness. Not just because he occasionally gets to meet with Prince William, because as lovely as a patron of the charity, or he was the patron of the charity, I don't know if he still is, but because I really admire Shea. So he's had a really interesting journey, particularly his transition from moving from Nigeria to the UK and the barriers that he experienced whilst he was in the UK when he first moved here. But Shea has got this incredible ability to act with warmth and kindness, but a real decisiveness. And the way he chairs meetings that always finish on time, but everyone gets the opportunity to have a say. The way he deals really robustly with difficult things, and he makes decisions that need to be made, but does it with great humanity. And I'd love to just follow him around and absorb a bit more Shea.
No, I think that's such a fantastic selection, particularly as you say, that warmth but being decisive. And then actually you feel that you've got a bit of a personal engagement, like he cares about you as an individual. And when you've got 15 individuals, 12 individuals from all different sort of experiences and sort of on their own sort of career trajectories, and I think that's the bit that I've really seen, is how to sort of control that, but also that underpinning lived experience, which he he's vulnerable in opening,
Yeah,
sharing,
he
and
is, yeah.
etc. So no, I think that's up there with the best we've had so far,
Yeah.
Ruth. But
Yeah.
Ruth, just like to say thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much
you.
for today's conversation,
Thank
and yeah, for being a part of this.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.